Intrepid viewers, 300 videos. How did that happen? When did it happen? We've been bonded through this nightmare for 300 videos. I can hardly believe it. And please, I feel so privileged to be engaged with you guys. It keeps me sane and it's just a total delight. I just love it. And thank you so much for your donations. This would be one hungry gal if it weren't for those donations lately. I don't want to be dramatic, but there you go. I've been very grateful for those. I want to thank the regular contributors to the forum. Look, you guys just put me onto so much good material. We have such a great exchange, and it's such a sanity saver all around. I think it has a therapeutic role, we are all safe in saying. And thanks all for those who are booking readings, because I get to meet you and it's fun on Skype having a chat. So don't forget, if you want readings, do get in touch down the track. But here we go. 300 big ones. Hold on, I've got to pause. So how to celebrate? I thought, well, I'm going to collect the most frequently asked requests and cover as much as I can today. I've got lots of cards out. We're going to do lots of spreads. We're going to cover a lot of territory. We'll be touching on Georgia. These theological terrorists in Georgia, appalling. But I thought we'd start with the international scene and move back to the US domestic scene. So China and Russia. How about Hillary coming out and saying, China, if you're listening, whatever, good on her. I think, you have to sort of sabotage them with their own stupid tactics, don't you really? But you've got so many moving parts in this. You've got China and Russia who are together with Iran. You've got China and Russia who are together with Syria. You've got China and Russia who are together in Venezuela. China and Russia who are together in North Korea. And suddenly you've got Bolton. What's with the 70s porn star moustache? It's a crime in itself. It's a crime. I'm sorry. Blathering on, such a hawk, Pompeo, who's just this blobby fascist. The two worst hawks in America in charge of this stuff. So I'm going to quickly look at each of them. I'm not actually interested in them as men, as people, personalities or anything, because I don't think they've got a personality. They're just, more narcissistic bulldogs, really. So they're pretty primitive beings. So I'm not interested in them particularly per se, but I'm interested in their roles with the CIA and the head of national security in relation to Russia and China. So quick little look using the Thoth deck for each of them. Then we'll look at Russia and China and what's going on there, and then we've got so much more. Here we go. We'll do the porn star first. John Bolton. China and Russia. What's going on for John Bolton? So, here we go. Oh, I wonder what'll happen, actually. Sort of a story, and then it's open-ended. So, the Seven of Cups in the Thoth, known as the debauchery card. Maybe the card's picked up on my porn star reference, because you certainly don't associate John Bolton with sort of debauchery, but he's such a baseline ideologue. It's like he probably could do with a bit of distraction. He's not had it. I don't know what his problem is. But the Seven of Cups is also illusion, delusion. And so he has a deluded attitude to what he can achieve and what his job is. things have been happening quickly. This is recent past, so this is up until now. Things have been very quick. And yes, they have. It's hard for all of us to keep up. And also what we don't know. Imagine behind the scenes in a major intelligence gathering organisation, what is going on? And the Machiavellian things about what do you do when you've got a sociopath as a president and you've got sub-sociopaths in these really important roles. It's not easy for people to work in the Department of Justice or the Pentagon or anywhere these days. It's sort of, it must be truly frightful. Now, there's a bit of a judgment thing going on here. The Aeon, he's hugely egotistical. These are cards normally Trump gets, but he's giving Trump a run for his money. He has like a pharaoh complex. What are you going to say? The reason he thinks that is he's had a pretty magical run. This is the Magician. For someone who he was always a player decades ago, but he was always seen as a really boring hardliner who wasn't capable of actually picking up on cultural nuances and processes that would actually change anything. He's much more like Steve Bannon, just hit them over the head. So he's had a magic run to, after all these decades, to be put in this role, you know. But the Magician goes both ways. The Magician can be a highly evolved individual bringing all the powers of the elements together for good, or the opposite. So we need to do a bit of a clarifier on John Boring Bolton. Okay, so it's in relation to Russia and China. I mustn't forget that. So what do we need to know about Bolton? His thing is Iran, of course. Oh, he's got it in for Iran. Oops, clarifier for Bolton. Defeat. Huh. That's all I've got to say about that. Huh. It's not surprising. Iran is Persia. And Persia has been its own self for thousands of years before Christianity. It's Persia. You are not going to have a win in the Middle East if you come from Anglo countries, because we don't understand the mentality and we don't understand the cultural roots of what is going on. That is why America can keep pouring in resources and will not have a significant victory ever in the Middle East. It has to be a diplomatic situation, and these are not diplomatic men. Okay, so they can do their worst with Iran, but it won't buckle because it's Persia and it's proud of its identity and proud of its history, and they'll just wait out yet another president. So, now, on to the flatulent fascist, Pompeo. Pompeo and the International Syrian. Pompeo's story. So, he's a funny guy, isn't he? On the one hand, he has a big identity and a big persona, but because he's fundamentally lazy, underneath this is the indolence card. He doesn't accomplish much, so he can do damage. He's a bit like Trump like that. He doesn't have to be that smart or that efficient, and he can get away with big talk, you know, when you wheel him out, he talks big. But he sort of flies under the radar, and that's partly because he's never at work in that sense of He doesn't actually, I'll tell you what I think, he doesn't actually think about his job at all. It's just about him, the Prince of Wands. But there's oppression here, the Ten of Wands, not a fun card. It's being noticed and he is being judged. So a bit like, it's funny they got the same card as Bolton. These guys are pharaonic. Use the old terms. They're like the old senators of Rome or something. You know, there was a handful of senators in Rome who wrote great speeches and had big thoughts and changed, you know, the course of history. And then there were the others, and they were the Boltons and the Pompeos and the Trumps, and they basically just took up oxygen. Someone else dry cleaned their togas, and they just voted on things that would improve their own self-interest. So things haven't changed, really, have they, since Circus Maximus? All right, now I want to move on to Russia and China. I think I'll do them separately, Russia, China, and then together how they're planning and relating to the US. Because like I said, they've had decades of history together. They know each other inside out. They've taken over Africa together. They've had great inroads in Latin America and Asia and the Pacific. They've been negotiating with each other in all the time, you know, basically since the Cold War. They've backed each other regardless of what's gone on. And in comes this clunky sort of Maxwell Smart sort of American stuff that's bizarre, embarrassing, inadequate, naive, crude, and, as we see again and again, ineffective. So let's have a look at Russia and China. What's happening first? I'm using my Japaridze deck because Nino Japaridze, who was the artist, is from Georgia, not Rainy Night in Georgia, Georgia as in ex-Soviet Union. So let's have a look at Russia. Oops. So, Russia and Putin and what is happening. Ooh, the world. Yeah, well, you know, as I said in a previous video, this hacking of elections is really cheap and easy. The forces behind Brexit, the Brexit vote, the same, exact same forces as behind the US debacle that led to the Yeti. Murdoch, Cambridge Analytica, all the Eric Princes, the same oligarchs, all the same players, just a few extra Brits and a few extra Americans here. But the things that moved it, all the same. And it's cheap. Couple of mil. You can run hackers for months. Okay, so why wouldn't they? And they are. Okay. Now, the world. Okay, that's been Putin's plan since the beginning. World domination. He doesn't think of anything less. He's not a guy about marking time. That is his raison d'etre. The Empress, the woman behind Putin. I'm not getting the wife vibe, apart from the fact I think he's divorced. I think this is further back in his past. I think this is a mother or an auntie, and she was one tough woman. And I don't mean that in flattering terms. I think she was tough and hard as nails, and she forged the hardness in him. So it's almost like an Empress reversed. That's my vibe when I pick up the Empress in relation to Putin. Underneath Russia's reading, things are going fine, and they are. Look, there's not going to be a popular uprising in Russia in the immediate future. I'm hoping I'm wrong about that, and I hope that it just means it's not yet. But this is able to keep Putin in power by constantly saying to the Russian people, look how powerful we are in the world, the fact that you haven't got a job or, nothing works, don't worry, because we, the Russian people, are powerful. So he's been very clever at that narrative, but you have to wonder how long it's going to last. Has he got another 2 years, 5 years, whatever? But it's not going to last. But it's going well enough for him, and if you don't like it, you will find yourself on the outer. On top of the reading, this is a kind of lonely, funny card for him. He who starts with the world. This is a sort of card of having to accept something you don't want particularly, not liking the choices you've been offered. The boat's sort of half in the water, half out of the water. You see what I mean? It's kind of desolate. So I think Putin is a bit depressed. I think he's actually a bit depressed. Okay, I don't know how old he is, but if you're a want-to-be dictator, he got there, full marks to him. He set out to do it, and he did it, and he's still there. So that means looking over your shoulder day and night. That means trusting no one. That means everything it means for any dictator to stay in power. But there comes a point where you get a bit lonely. And I think that's half of Trump's problem too, with the late night tweeting and everything. Because they can't trust anybody, you end up in this very isolated, quite depressed state. Okay, we're still talking about Russia. But he's up for it. How he deals with that is more gladiatorial behaviour. He will take on anybody. Right. So, Russia, business as usual, you could say, in many ways. We're now going to look at China with these same cards. So, yeah, it's funny with these tariffs. The stock market is wobbling. Expect more. It'll do this. Bigger. Expect more. But a lot of economists actually thought it wouldn't come to this. I mean, if you read the financial news, a lot of them were saying, well, look, he's blustering. He never follows through with anything. And they're really quite shocked. But China isn't a nation known for rushing. So while Trump can do his darndest, China's making 100-year plans, It's the complete opposite mindset. China. What's happening for China itself, first of all? Bearing in mind these are very micro readings on huge countries and huge issues. So China's card, ooh, the death card. Ooh, 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 ooh. We'll have to see. It's certainly not the death throes of the one-party system in any particular way, or that sort of death, but it is a different way of doing business. If we're going to be talking about the American economy in this context, that is not good for America. They're prepared to go to the wall and come down like the US has not seen. They are not going to take this lying down. Oh, wow. Oh, potential there for love and deals. So Trump thinks he's playing hardball, but I'm laughing because it's laughable. They are going to pull out some trump card, pardon the bad pun, on this guy. So underneath the Stranger of Fire. So, Knight of Wands, there's an opportunity here for China and the US. There's, in other words, a last-ditch stance. There is only one more significant exchange to be had, and it's onwards and upwards with the death card. I mean, sort of, it's almost a scorched earth policy, you know, about, whoa. So here's the chance that was talked about before, this is in the past, of a treaty. This is the opportunity to do that. But what is over them? I'm intrigued. Oh, the rip-off card, the Seven of Wands, Seven of Swords. They don't like this at all. Oh, and it's fated. Oh, wow. This is very different from what I expected. In other words, to sum this up, China was being, for the last 20 years, has been modernizing enormously and has, while capitalism has been looking over here, China's embraced so many of the tenets of capitalism, plus the one-party system. So many have got very wealthy and many have been lifted out of poverty, etc., etc. But it is recent that it's been in this modern incarnation, and it wants to go forward with that. So this death card to me is saying, don't push us any further because we will do whatever it takes. China is feeling ripped off. China is feeling ripped off. Now, I'm the first to say, viewers, just a mini digression. I've been trying to keep them to a minimum. China hasn't reacted hysterically at all of these threats. It hasn't been overtly aggressive in response. It's up saying, if you do this, we'll have to do this. You know, we're going to have to tariff you back. And your people mightn't notice, but our people do. It means they pay the tariffs. Dumbo. So they're feeling ripped off because he's not coming back. Negotiation is, I have my position, you have yours, you come with something, I counter it, I come and give you a little something. It's a movement, whereas the US trade, and you know, led by Peter Navarro and absolute ideological nutcases like that who haven't got a clue how the world works, they've just gone in hard with their final position. That is not good negotiation. Outcome is fated. Ooh. Outcome is fated. This is meant to be. I'm going to do another reading just on China and the fateful outcome card because we've got so much else to cover today. All right. Georgia. Georgia's certainly been on a few minds, hasn't it? I mean, really. It's nothing to do with children. It's everything to do with punishing sinful women who dare to be sexual when they're not married. Now, I'm old enough to remember what backyard abortions meant, right? When they were illegal. Australia has different states, legal in some states, not in others, but I'm talking back when it was illegal everywhere. Now, if you were a woman who came from an educated family or a family with money, it wasn't an issue because you'd just go to the doctor and have a curette. So it was a euphemism. But if you were poor or you were struggling, if you're unmarried, you either got married, the shotgun marriage, or you had to adopt your baby out because you were of bad character. Yeah. So who were having those backyard abortions? They were married women with children, already with kids, and they had to go to these butchers. You know, terrible. Now, I would never force anyone to go to abortion then, now, any other time if you're against it. Do not have to cross that line. Equally, women should not have to carry unwanted pregnancies to full term in this century. It's craziness. It's about to... So, Georgia, what's going to happen with Georgia? Back to this. Surely there'll be a reaction to this. There's an international reaction. It's worth looking online. For the first time, women are putting their hands up from the UK and other places saying, I had an abortion when I was young and I'm really grateful, and it meant I could get on with my life and it was the best decision I ever made, or whatever. Women don't normally tell the stories positive or negative. But I will tell you before I move on from this topic and do a quick reading on Georgia, that I worked for Family Planning, your equivalent of Planned Parenthood, and so women who wanted a referral to a clinic, 70% of them then and now are still married women with kids, because they're the ones who know exactly what's involved. So either teenagers will often say, I'm going to keep my baby. As my mother warned my sister and me, just set your alarm clock every 2 hours for a month and see how you feel. It was good advice for early teens. Anyway, this is another development altogether, this punishing of women in jail, accusing them of murder if they go into state. This stuff is so out of line. Where is the separation of church and state? It is medieval. We are told that Sharia law is bad. We're told this by people who don't know what Sharia law says about anything, really. But nonetheless, you know, we're sort of told it must be barbaric. This is barbaric. Don't forget, America, you also have the highest rate of child marriage in the developed world. It's the same issue. This is making, you know, the Loretta Lynn story, you know, just get married at 14 and off you go, pet. You know, it's just... The red states are the poorest states. The poorest states are the most religious. This is a pattern globally. The poorer people are, the less education they have, the more prone they are to hyper-religiosity. So those reverends who don't have theological training, you know, they're not learned people or wise and compassionate people who are offering counselling to their flock. No, you know, they're grisly, lecherous guys who take no responsibility for making these appalling decisions. But I will upload that video for you soon. All right. Now, another pause. Intrepid viewers, I just took the video off pause again because I realised I was so manic with excitement with the 300th video that I hadn't finished. So before I get to Georgia, we have to look at Russia and China in relation to the US. So I'm going back to the trusty Rider-Waite because you're more familiar with that imagery as well, and we'll see exactly what's going on there. So let's see, Russia and China and the US. Playing with fire. Oops, what fell out? I'll check it in a minute. Russia, China and the US. All right. Now, card that fell out, the Mercenary. Okay. Could be all three. We'll see from this. So, what we're going to do is Russia on this side and China on this side in relation to the US. So, for Russia, we have these, and for China, we have those. Okay. So, in the middle, the mercenaries. So, the easiest interpretation for that card in this would be that all of it is not surprising, that each country is in it for their own money in the end. It's a Pentacles card. This is the War Horse. So that all three are in sort of war posturing mode because the biggest fear a lot of us have, and you've shared it on this channel amongst other things, of course, is most presidents who start losing ground, always handy to start a war somewhere. So, you know, Trump would if he could. So let's just hope the Pentagon's standing up to these hawkish manoeuvrings. But nonetheless, this card, Warhorse, but also this is the knight who's bought and sold. So the mercenary card in that sense. So they're all looking out for themselves, not surprisingly. So, with Russia, the manipulation, the active manipulation of the elections of Trump, but there's a problem for them with Trump coming up in the next card. So, this is keeping the balls in the air with Trump. The Four of Wands, diminished celebration. So on the one hand, this is Putin and Trump glad-handing, but if you can see on this camera, there are people in the background, normal people, who aren't watching. So they're bonding together over that, but people have really taken their eye off that to some extent. But the problem for Putin, which is why the wands themselves are massive compared with the people, he can't control Trump in the way he thought he could. A, because Trump's uncontrollable and can't hold consecutive thoughts in his head. Even if he wants to do the right thing by someone, he just can't keep it together. And also, his power is, although to us it looks like he's got boundless power, he's in fact quite ineffectual in Putin's world, because again he has these contradictory things going on, like economically as well. But with these things, he's sending his hawks out in those countries, North Korea, Venezuela, Iran, and it's not what Russia wants. They wanted a rollover president for their foreign escapades, the Hierophant. So I think the Hierophant here represents grumpy Putin, I think, was a bit of this failure. Or it could be what's left of the government institutions in America are standing up to Trump. It could be that. A couple of interesting things have happened legally. 20 states and growing, are threatening to take him off the ballot if he doesn't show his tax returns. And over 500 attorneys from the ex-Justice Department have written a letter saying Trump should be charged. This is unprecedented stuff. We are living through history. So, before we go further, we need to clarify on the Hierophant. Is this leftover of adults in the Pentagon, or is this Putin? The Apprentice. Yeah, I think it is Putin, and he's got the screaming shits with The Apprentice, Donald. He's only an apprentice dictator, and he's not very good even at that. Okay, so yeah, we've got that sorted. Now with China coming down, China's seriously unhappy about what America's doing. Not that this is sort of mortal distress in the usual sense in one person's card. This is more symbolic in the sense of they really wanted to just keep making money in the modern world. So this is not comfortable for China either, right? But this is a really intriguing card. There is cause for celebration. Again, we're talking a country, not people, so it's not three women literally celebrating, but it is a cause for celebration. I think they've been really worried about the irrational behaviour of the US. They've been really worried about the actual tariffs, because it's a pain in the ass to distribute, and actually administer these tariffs. I think they've come up with a plan, and I think they're really happy. They've actually got him somehow, and we don't know yet what that'll look like. They still have to choose whether to implement whatever plan this is. They're at a crossroads. This is very emotional too, with the water and the moon. The cups are emotion. This is like on an emotional level, they have to make this decision crossroads. Are we going to use our big guns in this economic thing? And I have a feeling they might, but let's get a clarifier on what is the celebration around, what is the issue, what is it they've got over the US? Oh, I just heard, and I'll tell you in a minute, all big cards, and I just heard debt from my guides. They've got, because they've bought up so much of the US's debt, if they wanted to call it in tomorrow, I'm sorry, the whole country would be in serious strife. And what cards turn up? The Queen of Pentacles, money, and justice and money. And this is about the security around money and owning money, trading money, owning debt and trading debt. So I think they're thinking, are we going to really go for the big guns? Because the Treasury, I suspect, can't actually back up the wah-wah on the stock market. Wow, I wonder if they'll do that. Okay, now we have to touch on Georgia. Will they get away with this, or will there be a reaction, or what? It's really disturbing. Really disturbing. Georgia, what's going on? Georgia. Knight of Cups. Oh, yeah, it's certainly the Hierophant and the Gun to Home. Big change. Okay, so the Knight of Cups has come in, an opportunity. This is an opportunity for women all over America, and it is progressively a worldwide thing. Please don't think you're alone. This is an opportunity. This crap that they've come up with, this is Handmaid's Tale stuff. It's beyond anything. We cannot believe we're expected to live in Australia or in the US under the Old Testament. I mean, really. And then they get what's normally a good card, hopes and wishes fulfilled, the satisfied merchant. I have said, particularly in my early videos, I've never liked the imagery on this card, even though it's always supposed to be this wonderful card. For some reason, I get a heartfelt thing of slave trading around this, and this is the trading in women's bodies for some petulant right-wing agenda. Shocking. The Hierophant at its worst. Those who will carry out the legislation or support the legislation because they're just hired guns. Sudden big change. Sudden, does this mean this is the sudden big change? I have to do a clarifier, or is there going to be a sudden big change and reaction to this? Viewers, please tell me what the reaction has been in the States on the ground to this. It's disgusting. So, the Eight of Wands. Oops. The Eight of Wands. What's that about? The sudden change. What's it about? Truth. Truth and justice will prevail, because this is part of the mythology that builds up, that you can control people like this in 2019 in this despicable fashion, and the hypocrisy of these pro-lifers who are also pro the death sentence. How can you be pro-life and pro the death sentence? Please explain. Like what? I mean, it's so ridiculous. So hopefully this is going to lead to challenging a lot of the other laws that are not quite as overt and repressive and medieval, but are not good for women. Hopefully, women will galvanise around this issue, and like with first and second wave feminism, there needs to be good men who support these issues too. It's so important. All right, so moving down the list. Yeah, oh look, Hillary saying China, if you're listening, that was such a highlight. I love that. Now, I think I'm just going to finish here on what the Dems should be doing. How should the Dems be reacting to this? The Dems, what should they be doing? What should the Dems be doing? Okay. Let's have a look. Yeah, rip off. That can be interpreted, obviously, many ways. I don't think it's a Democratic Party ripping people off at this early stage. I think it's more Democratic voters feeling ripped off at the moment, because the party sort of, I'm sure it's not paralysed behind the scenes, but if you are someone who was waiting for the blue wave to get into power to impeach this man, you are feeling ripped off. They are also, as a party, the party machine is feeling ripped off, because in many of these things they should be able to simply rubber stamp something and be supported by the judiciary in some of these very obvious cases. So they've been ripped off by the system being undermined before they got in. So, introspection, being quite aggressive, conservative with money. Okay, these are the hints that they need to draw on these elements. This is the card of introspection as a party. Now, that doesn't mean they all go quiet, but it means they have to do some soul searching. Each and individual Democrats, I'm talking in the party here, have to do some soul searching, and they have to find ways to work together, regardless of where they're coming from, because they're sure as hell needed now. Not to be afraid of the blunt attack. They need a bit of the Fred Flintstone themselves. They need a bit of a mongrel, as we say in Australia. Someone who's got a bit of mongrel. I'll just explain that term, just so it's not misunderstood. Often, say, with a modern football team, they're called checkbook teams because they're put together by these football boards, and they'll often have these fabulous players with huge skills, but the team just doesn't gel and doesn't win games, and that's because we would say they haven't got the mongrel in there. And that's someone who really cares about the issue and goes for it and goes for it. Avenatti was going to be their best mongrel. You need someone like Avenatti before he lost the plot. Just an interesting little aside, viewers. Kirsten and I did a joint video on Michael Avenatti 7 or 8 months ago, and we both said he would explode. She got the tower, I got something else. And that was at his height, and we were kind of thinking, really, he looked so fabulous. Anyway, someone like Avenatti was, who's fast, quick, funny, they need it, and they need it out there. They need the thinkers as well. They need the thinkers. They need their reasonable people. You need the whole thing. You need the Bidens and the Schumers, but really, they need a bit of mongrel. Sorry, I've got to just pause again. Here we go again. I'm home alone. I thought that would be a good time to make a video, but no, I've got to answer the door and the phone and everything else. So here we are back. So the Australian concept of needing a bit of mongrel in there that terrifies the opposition. They hear that they're going to be on a panel on some TV show and the mongrel's going to be there. Be afraid, be very afraid. They need, in fact, they need a few. They need a few. They need to have a fairly conservative economic message. That wouldn't be hard, given that the Republicans are happy to sign away literally the family farm, everybody's farm. They're prepared to sell out the whole country. They're prepared to run up an absolutely gobsmacking national debt with no plan to do anything but add to it. So it won't take much for the Dems to make an economic argument for a change. Usually the shoe's on the other foot. What else do they need to know? Beware the tower. They've got to get this right, or they could shoot each other in the foot. The problem is, once again, America, your voting system. We have a preferential voting system in Australia, and so how that works is someone is from the Hunters and Shooters Party or something very small. They're only going to get a handful of votes. But you know, most times they're going to side with the Conservatives about things. You've got the Green Party, which is much larger. It's about a regular 10 or 12% of the vote, wanting things to go green. But you know that their preferences, in turn, go to the Labor Party or our Democrats. So both sides benefit from it, from their various parties. But the point is, you can vote for those other people, the independents and stuff, knowing where it's going to go instead of just taking a vote from the good guys. That's what worries me about the independents and the Dems have to be very careful of that. But these are connected. This is what the introspection is, and they have to come to a compromise, and that's not easy. It's not easy for the old guard Pelosi types to concede to the young ones, and it's not easy for the young ones who are out there and fearless to have to toe the line. It's not easy. It's not easy for the Democrats, and they could fuck it up. Excuse the language. They've got to look out and beyond. Well, they certainly would have to do a better job at that as well, because the world is reeling from just the sheer abuse that Trump has handed out to the traditional allies. So they'll be fine with that. There is disappointment on the horizon if they are not careful. Right? They've got to be really careful of the tower. They could be disappointed or disappointing. Now, their outcome cards. Here we have the Justice card. Phew, we needed that. Oh, good. And the Compromise card. Oh, phew. In other words, if they can compromise, think about it, compromise, they will avoid the tower and justice will prevail. But they must do that, or they will be disappointed in themselves and people will be disappointed in them. So they've got to be really careful. I love you guys so much. I've got to stop now or it'll take 2 days to upload. Moi. Keep the comments. Thumbs up. Ciao for now. Bye.